This conference will now be recorded.
We will be talking about payment transactions for customers and vendors. Let's talk about payment transactions for customer and vendor. Here we will be focusing on bank payments majorly. You have two type of payment. One is cash payments. Second one is bank payments. To make any cash payment, what functionality we have to use? For cash payment,
Cash application.
you will have to use cash journals.
Cash.
For bank payments, you will have to use house bank. In short, without cash journal, we are not supposed to use cash payment. Without house bank, we are not supposed to use bank payment when you are working on SAP. Now let's talk about bank payments. After bank payments, we will be talking about cash payments. Now, when you talk about bank payment, or in short, when you talk about a payment, if you talk about payment, let it be any payment, whether you're talking about a vendor payment or you're talking about a customer payment. The mode of payment, sequence of payment, the type of payment will remain the same. Normally, I'll say payments are made for purchases or sales made. Correct? You will be making payments for either purchases or sales that you have made.
Yes.
Now, you have different type of payment. First one is normal payment. This normal payment is nothing but full payment. We normally call it as normal payment. This normal payment is nothing but full payment. Second one is your advance payment. This is also called as down payment. This is also called as token amount. Okay, any other name for down payment or advance payment apart from these three? Third one, you have on account payment. Or you also call it as open account payment. Fourth one, you will be talking about partial payment. Fifth one, we will be talking about residual payments. First thing that you have to understand is there are 5 type of payments that are possible, either for a customer or for a vendor. One is your normal payment or full payment. Let's say your outstanding is 1000, you are making full payment of 1000, that is called as normal payment transaction. On the other side, this is your advance payment before receiving the invoice. Before receiving the invoice or before receiving the product or before delivering the product, if you are receiving the payment, that is nothing but your advance payment. Next one, on account payment. If you receive any payment without referring to any invoice, you have received the payment but you do not know for what purpose this payment is received, against which invoice this payment is received. In such cases, you will be recording all those payments as on account payment or open account payment. Next one, partial payment. Last one, residual payment. This partial payment and residual payment are part of part payments. I'm not settling or I'm not paying a complete amount. I am paying bits and pieces of the amount. If my outstanding is 1000, let's say I am paying only 200, 300, 500, 800, something like that. This kind of part payment or incomplete payment is nothing but either part payment or residual payment. This partial payment and residual payment are two different methods within the part payment. One works on the opposite side, the other works on the other side. Let's say if one works on the payment amount, the other one will work on the remaining amount. In short, partial payment will work on payment amount, residual payment will work on balance amount. In short, residual payment will work on balance payment. Now, to put a simple example, let me write invoice value is 1000. I will write invoice value is 1000, assuming your invoice value is 1000. If I have to make a normal payment, full payment, how much I need to pay?
Full amount.
According to normal payment, if it is a full payment, considering your invoice value is 1000, what will be the payment amount?
We have to pay 1,000.
It is 1000 because we are talking
Fully we
about
have to set.
normal payment, in which we are talking about it's a full payment. Whatever is your invoice outstanding, the same amount you will be making the payment. Second one, advance payment or down payment. In the advance payment or down payment, what will happen? There is a predetermined agreement between buyer and seller. Either we may have an agreement that you have to make 10% advance or 20% advance or 100% advance or 50% advance. Depending on the terms agreed between the buyer and seller, there will be advance payment coming into the picture. There is no logic, there is no fixed rule for advance payment. It depends from vendor to vendor, customer to customer. Percentage of advance is not mandatory. What percentage of amount you need to pay as advance is also not mandatory. It depends. Let's say if 20% is to be paid as advance, how much we have to pay as advance?
80.
If advance is to be paid as 20%, advance is always paid
Remaining
on the basis of invoice amount. If the invoice value is 1000, 20% of your invoice value will be 200, correct?
yes, sir.
You'll have to pay 200 as advance. Third one is on account payment. On account payment will come into picture when you receive the payment but you do not know the amount. Let's say I have received somewhere around 1300 rupees. If I receive 1300, what is the outstanding that you see in the vendor account for a particular invoice? Here in our example, our invoice value is
300.
1000. Invoice value.
300.
Invoice value. Invoice value is 1000. But the payment that you received is 1300. Can you identify this 1300 worth invoice or invoices equaling to 1300?
Invoice equivalent to 1,003.
No, for this payment amount, do you have the sufficient invoices?
No, sir, excess amount.
Right, you do not have the exact invoice number against which you can match this payment. Now, whenever you receive a payment, you need to apply the payment to the respective invoice or the respective outstanding amount. Current outstanding amount is only 1000, whereas you received payment is 1300. I cannot decide that whether I received payment excess or this 1300 for any other advance payment, or why the 300 excess paid. I do not know. When will I come to know why 1300 is received? Only when I get a payment advice from the supplier or from the customer. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Whoever is giving you the payment, they will have to inform this 1300 we are making the payment for these reasons for the below invoices. This is nothing but your payment advice. Let's say you received the payment but you did not receive any payment advice. If there is no payment advice, it is difficult for you to identify to which invoices this payment to be applied. In such scenarios, you will not clear any invoices, but you will record this payment as on account payment or open account payment. Your payment will reflect as unadjusted payment or unallocated payment. In short, your customer account balance or your vendor account balance will be reflected with the payment. The outstanding amount will get reduced, but the invoice will still show as open. Because I am not clearing the invoice, I am not knocking off the invoice until I get the payment advice from my supplier or from the customer that this payment is against these invoices. Only with that confirmation I will be clearing the invoices. Otherwise, it is not recommended to clear the invoices. You have to record them as open account payment or on account payment. Next one, if you receive a partial payment. Now partial payment is nothing but amount received less than what is to be received. According to this example, your invoice value is 1000. Let's say if my payment amount is 200. If I received payment as 200, according to partial payment in bracket, what did we mention? In the partial payment, what is mentioned in the brackets? Payment amount.
Payment amount.
According to partial payment, if you make payment of 200, your partial payment is represented as 200 only, because partial payment always talks about payment amount. On the other side, if I talk about residual payment, here also I will put 200. But in residual payment, what is mentioned in the
Balance.
brackets?
Balance
Balance amount. If you make the 200 payment, what is the balance?
800.
How much is the balance? 800.
Yes, sir.
When you make the partial payment, system is going to show you 800. Because your residual payment is always based on the balance amount, partial payment is always based on the payment amount. Whatever the amount you pay, for that amount you will be able to see the transaction. But on the other side, for the residual payment, out of 1000, if you pay 200, you will be able to see a balance amount of 800. So even when you pass the partial payment, residual payment, you have to keep these 2 points in your mind. Clear, these 5 type of payments?
Yes, sir.
Next one, payments are always made on due dates. Agree? You will not just like that make the payment as and when you have money, or you will be making the payment on the due date. What will happen? You keep on making the payments as you want, or you will be making the payment based on the due dates.
Based on due date.
Based on the due dates, you will be making the payment. Now, how do you come to know that this is the due date? On what basis you will calculate or you will find out the due date? To calculate payment due date, what is required?
Based on terms payment.
Based on payment terms or terms of payment. Now, due date is calculated based on payment terms. Payment terms will tell you how your due date is calculated. Let's say some customer or some vendor may have a credit period of 1 month. If I say there is a credit period of 1 month, from the date of purchase or from the date of sale, you have to either make the payment or receive the payment within 30 days. Correct? For example, assuming purchase date is today, credit period is 30 days. what will be the net due date? How your due date is calculated? You will simply have to take this date and add 30 days to it. What is the due date?
7/21/23.
7/21/23. Your invoice date or your purchase date is 6/21. For 6/21, if you add 30 days, it has become 7/21. 7/21 becomes your due date. And anybody who is making the payment will be making the payment before the due date or on the due date. Nobody will make the payment if you purchase today. Your credit period is 30 days, which means after a month you need to pay. Nobody will pay immediately because everybody will have to manage their liquidity, everybody will have to manage their funds. So they will not be making the payment unless and until the due date is nearby. On the due date, they will be making the payment in any organization. Your due dates are determined by payment terms. Your due dates are determined by payment terms. Now, within payment terms are of two types again. One is normal terms, second one is installment terms. When we talk about normal payment terms, I will be talking about, let's say, due in 10 days or due in 30 days, 60 days, or let's say 5% discount in 15 days and due in 30 days, something like this. You will get normal payment terms. When you talk about normal payment term, payment will be made in single installment. When you talk about normal payment term, your payment will have to be made in single installment. When you talk about single installment, it's a one-time payment. Am I correct? When I talk about a normal payment, whatever the amount that is due will have to be paid on the due date. There is no exception to it. If my invoice value, again let me take 1000. If my invoice value is 1000 in this example also, if I say payment terms due in 10 days, when I have to pay the 1000 rupees? Within 10 days from the purchase, correct? Similarly, when I have to make the payment, if my payment terms is 30 days, within 30 days, after 30 days, should I make the full payment or part payment? If I talk about payment term, after payment due date or on the payment due date, should we make the full payment or part payment?
Full payment.
Full
You
payment.
have to make full payment. Your normal payment terms are always talking about the full payment, not the partial payment. On the other side, if you talk about installment terms, this installment terms will split your invoice into different terms. The same concept as your EMIs. If I say due in 2 installments or due in 4 installments, or maybe I'll say 20% in 30 days, balance in 60 days. I can split this into any ways. So these are your installment terms. If I'm talking about due in 2 installments, what system will do? It will divide the invoice value by 2. And it will create 2 separate line items. It will create 2 separate receivables. It will create 2 separate payables. First one with the outstanding date of next month. The other one will be the outstanding date of next month. One outstanding will be within 30 days, first month, first installment. Second outstanding will be in the second month, which is outstanding in 60 days. Likewise, your installment payment terms will be used. Now, based on the payment terms, you will be determining the due date. Due date is very important for any payment transaction. Whether you make the payment manually or you make the payment automatically, doesn't matter. Any payment must contain the due date. In short, whenever you're recording any invoice transaction, one of the prerequisites is to ensure payment terms are updated in every transaction of the vendor or customer. Second point, net due date is determined in all your customer vendor transactions. All the vendor and customer master must contain payment terms. First point, all the vendor masters, customer masters must contain payment terms. Second one, all the invoices and credit memos must contain payment terms. Clear first 2 points? When you create any vendor master, when you create any customer master, you need to ensure your customer master and your vendor master contains payment terms. Second point, whenever you record any invoice transaction, whenever you record any credit memo or return transactions, payment term must be updated. Next one, if payment terms are updated in master data, in the transaction, the payment term is automatically derived. Let's say your vendor master contains the payment term. Whatever the payment term that is there in the vendor master record or customer master record, whenever you perform any transaction for that particular vendor or for that particular customer, by default, system will bring the payment term from the master data. In case if you want to change the payment term for any one particular invoice or any one particular transaction, you have to manually change. Otherwise, by default, from the master record, payment term is updated in the transaction record. Clear? Next one, your net due date is calculated based on baseline date. From what date net due date is calculated?
Baseline date.
Your due date is calculated from the baseline date. Now you need to understand what is a baseline date. Let's say baseline date is used for determining due date. Okay, baseline date is used for determining due date. We can decide either entry date or posting date or document date to be a baseline date. Your baseline date can be entry date of the transaction, document date of the transaction, or posting date of the transaction, or you can put a manual date in baseline date as your transaction. Clear? In payment terms, we will update the baseline date logic. On what logic you want to determine the baseline date is decided in the payment term configuration. Any doubt so far with these points? Any questions? Yes, Ravi.
Ajay, this is regarding the portion payment that customer or vendor is making to the vendor we are making. In what business situation we will go for the residual or partial?
If you are making payment to a vendor,
Or yes, and
okay,
what is the
let's say,
advantage that brings to us?
okay, let's say you have an invoice of 1000, the same example. If your invoice value is 1000, let's say you have to make the payment, but due to some reasons you are unable to make the full payment. Sometimes what will happen, your vendor might stop the shipment to you if the payments are not received. If your overdue amount is more, sometimes vendors will stop the shipment. Sometimes vendors will stop taking the orders. What they will tell, you make some initial payment or at least some payment you release, then we will release the orders. Sometimes our vendor account may be on hold. So in such cases, or sometimes you may be short of funds, you will be initiating part payments. Out of 1000, let's say if I am making payment of only 2000. To record this 2000, we have two options. Option number one, recording this payment as partial payment. Option number two, recording this payment as residual payment. Now, either you talk about partial payment or you talk about a residual payment, we have not fully cleared the invoice. Either of the cases, from part payment or from the residual payment, our invoice is not fully cleared. There is still outstanding from this invoice. Let's say my invoice is 1000. I'll put this two times. One time I'll say part payment of 200. On the other side, I'll tell residual payment of 200. In both the situations, your net outstanding is 800. Correct? Huh? In both the situations, your net outstanding is 800. Clear till here?
Yep.
Now, let's say whenever we are talking about part payment or a residual payment, we are not fully clearing the invoice. Now, after 800, let's say I made another part payment of 400. Here also I made another residual payment of 400. After making 400, the net outstanding will become again 400, or let me put 300 here. It has become 500, 300, net outstanding is 500. Now again I'll make another part payment of 400. Another residual payment of 400. Here net outstanding will be 100. Here also net outstanding will be 100. And I'll make the final payment. This will be for 100. So that net outstanding will become 0. Here also I'll make final payment. This will be net outstanding. Final payment is 100. Net outstanding is 0. If you look at this payment log for a particular invoice, if you see it from the partial payment point of view, it has got how many payments? 1, 2, 3 and 4. Correct? In the partial payment scenario, you are making the payment in 4 intervals. On the other side, for the residual payment also, you are making payment in 4 intervals. Now, when you know that you have made the payment in different intervals based on the availability of funds or based on different reasons, tomorrow if you look at this invoice, and you may be interested in knowing the payment history for this invoice, when we received the invoice, when we made the payment, yes or no?
Yep.
You'll have to know the history of the payment when we made the payment. Now if you look at this, you understood, okay, this invoice is not settled in one go. We settled the invoice in multiple payments, which means we've been paying this invoice on the partial or on the part payment basis. If I want to track when each payment or each partial payment was made and for what amount, based on what payment method. If you are using partial payment, it is possible for you to get the payment track. Payment history is possible with part payment. With partial payment, payment history is possible. On the other side, if you adopt residual payment, if you are adopting residual payment, here also you may be interested in knowing the payment history. I want to know the payment history for this invoice 1000. Invoice number is XYZ, amount is 1000. Please tell me how did we settle this invoice to the customer or to the vendor. Now, if you know the fact that this is a residual payment, the payment history is not possible. In the residual payment, payment history is not possible. You cannot tell how this 1000 is settled to a vendor. On what date, how much payment you have made, finally how many payments you have done is not possible using residual payment, because residual payment will break the chain of invoice and payment connection. The moment you make the residual payment, here we have written your residual payment is always balance amount. So it will remove the invoice as outstanding right from the first payment only. The moment you make the initial payment of 200, system is not going to update payment amount as 200. Instead, system will update the balance amount as 800. In fact, you made a payment of 200, but instead of showing the payment as 200, system will start showing balance as 800. So, which means what residual payment is doing, it is clearing your invoice with the first residual payment. In the system, right after the first residual payment, your invoice will no longer appear as outstanding. Your invoice will tell this is fully cleared. And for the balance 800 amount, system will create another open transaction, which will lead to unnecessary unwanted confusions. That is the reason we normally do not prefer, do not recommend residual payment in the real environment. This point is one of your interview questions. They will ask you to explain about partial payment, residual payment, difference between partial, residual payment, which payment do you recommend to your client and why. So you have to explain them what happens with the partial payment, what happens with the residual payment. This point is what most important, payment history. Because when you're working with customer accounts, when you're working with vendor accounts, this is one of the key information. Payment history is the key information. At any given point of time, you must be in a position to trace the payment information for a particular invoice. If it is still outstanding, if it is paid, if it is unpaid. For all these three reasons, you must have detailed breakup, detailed information from the system. For that to happen, it is always recommended to go with partial payment. If you go with partial payment, if I want to track the payment history, the moment I put the invoice number, I can easily find out this is paid in 1, 2, 3, 4 installments or 4 separate instances. First payment was made on XYZ date for 200 rupees. Second payment was made on so and so date for 300 rupees. third payment, fourth payment. This information is possible with part payment but not with residual payment. Clear?
Thanks, Ajay. One more question related to the payment term, whether it is possible to have a dynamic payment term based on certain conditions.
You can have, but your payment term must contain a fixed logic to determine the due date. You can create dynamic payment terms, but each payment term will work on a single logic only. Let's say I want to calculate my payment terms based on number of days. Let's say from the date of invoice, 15 days, 20 days, 30 days. This is one condition. Second one, I will say I want to have my payment term based on the discount. Within the specific time interval, I will be eligible to get a discount or give a discount. After this eligibility period, I want to ensure that the full amount is paid. You will be writing like within 10 days 5% discount, within 30 days no discount. On the other side, you can write with installments. If you wanted to make the payment with 3 installments, whatever the purchase amount, whatever the sales amount you have will be split into 3 lines. Other side, you want to make based on the days in short. If the invoice is received in this month, let it be any days. If the invoice is received within 28th of this month, the due date will be next month end. Or if the invoice is received in the first of this month, the due date will become end of this month. Like this also we can put the payment terms.
Let me put my question in a different way, Ajay. Let's say that we are receiving a invoice from the vendor. Let's say that if it is below 5,000 rupees, then I want to choose payment term A. If it is above 5,000 rupees, I want to choose payment term B.
You want this to happen automatically by the system, or you want a user to update this?
I would prefer to happen automatically if there is a feasibility in SAP. Whether SAP
Okay.
provides any provision to that.
Normally, when we want to update the payment term based on the amount, we will have to check the feasibility from the invoice screen. At what level you want to update the payment term. Normally, it depends on the nature of a transaction that you are doing. If we are posting a customer invoice, for example, in the customer invoice, there are two type of customer invoices. Point number one, direct customer invoice, which you will pass from the finance side. Correct? Second one, customer invoice from the SD side, which will trigger through sales order. If your customer invoice is based on the finance side, either using F-22 or FB60 or FB70, what you want to do, you want to put an enhancement. You wanted to put an enhancement to ensure that the payment term is validated against the invoice amount. Whatever the amount you are entering in the invoice or customer account, if this amount is beyond 5,000, you want payment term X to be updated. If the amount is less than 5,000, you want payment term B to be auto updated. Correct?
Yeah.
So for this, two options. Option number one, we can test this requirement with finance validation. When I say finance validation, we can write a simple FI validation to check as prerequisite will be your customer account. Whenever you have the customer account, your customer account type is D. If your account is customer and you wanted to verify the amount, if the account is customer, the amount is above 5,000, you want to make sure that the payment term is X. You are going to put a validation. If the amount is more than 5,000, payment term should be X. In the other validation, if the amount is less than 5,000, payment term will be Y. This validation we can write and check. If it is working fine, we will be proceeding with this simple validation to meet the requirement. If this validation is not working, we will have to do a enhancement from the ABAP point of view. We will have to inform this requirement to the technical consultant ABAP. What they will do on the invoice screen, your invoice screen, whatever you are posting, will contain a program in the backend. In this program, they will check if there are any enhancement points, if there are any exits provided by the system. They will find the relevant spot and they will write the code to ensure that before you save the invoice, this custom validation, whatever they incorporate in the program, will get it triggered. What it will do, it will verify your invoice amount and it will match your invoice amount with the payment term. They'll put a condition. This you can do to meet this requirement. Option number 1, trying with the validation from the finance side as a FICO consultant. If it is working, we will be proceeding with it. If not, we will have to get it done through the technical enhancement by ABAP consultant.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So this is about your payment terms. Now, after writing the payment terms, let's write payment methods. So we will be having two payment methods. First one will be check payment. Second one will be bank transfers. One is for check payment, the other one is bank transfers. When you're talking about check payment, when you're talking about bank transfer, we are representing bank payment only, because currently we are talking only about bank payments. We are not talking about cash payment. Okay, we are discussing only about bank payment. We are focusing only on the payment that is initiated from the bank point of view. Cash payment we will discuss, we will understand separately. When you talk about payment methods, we are writing two payment methods. One is cash payment, the other one is bank payment. When you talk about cash payment, when you talk about check payment, you are issuing a check. Here we will issue the check or receive the check, correct? Either you will issue a check to a supplier or you will receive the check from your customer. When you talk about bank transfer, here we will initiate payment transfer or we will receive payment transfer. If it is for your vendor, you will be initiating the payment transfer. If it is from the customer, you will be receiving the payment transfer. Now, to segregate your actual payment transaction, you have to create separate bank GL account. To segregate your payment, you need to make sure the right relevant GL accounts are already created. If you're talking about check payment, if you receive a check, you should have a separate GL account for check receipts. If you're issuing a check, you need to have a separate GL account for tracking the check payments, check issues. Similarly, for your bank transfer, whatever the transfer that you're receiving in, you should have a separate GL account for transfer incomings. Similarly, for all your transfer outgoings, you should have a separate GL account. This separate tracking of each payment is mandatory in order to make sure your bank reconciliation is properly performed. If you are not able to record, if you are not able to segregate the payments, it will be very difficult for us to perform BRS or bank reconciliations. Considering BRS in the mind, we need to ensure all the payment transactions are properly recorded at the time of payment. Now, let's talk about vendor payments first. If you're talking about vendor payment, to a vendor, you will make the check payment. When you're issuing a check payment to the vendor, you have two options. Option number 1, manual check issues or issue check manually to vendors. When I say issue check manually to the vendors, you are going to write the check manually. Here we will write the check manually, which means check date, amount, payee name, signature, everything is manual in your manual check payment. Other one is your issue check automatically to vendors. In this case, here system will print all the details on the check. If you're talking about automatic payments, system is going to print all the details on the check automatically. You have manual vendor payments and you have automatic vendor payments. If you talk about manual vendor payments, in your manual vendor payments, there are two types again. One is payment without printout. Second one, payment with printout. In your manual payment, there are two options again. One is payment without printout. The other one is payment with printout. In the automatic payment, it's always payment with printout. Automatic vendor payment is always payment with printout. Clear? First, we will be talking about check payments. Later on, we will talk about bank transfer payments. If you understand check payment, the same way your bank transfer payment will be there. Additional configurations related to bank payment file will be separately handled. So that we will discuss separately regarding your bank transfer files. How the files are prepared, on what logic you will prepare the file, how you will get the file, we will understand a little later. Before that, we must have thorough understanding on automatic payment program and how your payments are made, how different scenarios are executed. Now I want everybody to go through these points, whatever we have discussed. All these points you must be familiar with, so that when you do payment transactions on the system, it will be easy for you to understand what we are doing, why we are doing. Clear? Now let me show you the payment screens now. On the SAP, I'll show you the screens in which you will be making the payments. F-53 is one screen where you will make the payment. This screen is payment with printout or without printout. Is it with printout or without printout?
Third printout.
This is without printout. Now let me open another screen. F-58. This one. This is your payment with printout. Whose company is this? Okay, one is your payment with printout, the other one is payment without printout. Let me open another screen. This is your automatic payment. Here I have listed payment without printout, which will be used in F-53 screen. Payment with printout is F-58 screen. Automatic payment program is F110 screen. Now all these three screens you can see here. This is your post outgoing payment header data is payment without printout. No printout is generated in this. It will be only a plain payment document generation. The other side, payment with printout, here you can generate the checks. Here you can generate the checks or you can generate the bank transfer letters, whatever you want. Third one is your automatic payment program. Here system will make the payment, at the same time system will give you the output. If it is a check payment, check will be coming as output. If it is a transfer payment, your payment transfer file will be coming as output. These are the three transactions wherein you will be dealing with your vendor payments. In case of your customer payment, we don't have multiple payments for customer. Customer, whatever the amount that you are receiving, you will be updating through F-28. For customer, whatever the payment you receive, you will be updating using F-28 or post incoming payments. You will not be having any separate screen for check payment. You will not have any separate screen for bank transfer payment, because you will be updating the check number or bank transfer reference number only for the purpose of bank reconciliations in case of a customer, because you are at the receiver end. When you are at the payer end for the vendor, you need to make sure what is the payment number, transfer reference number, check number, to make sure that this payment is cleared in the bank, your funds are deducted, your vendor settlement is completed. But for the customer side, it is not like that. Customer, it is a straightforward payment recording. But for the vendor side, since we are initiating the payment, you will have separate screens, separate functionalities for tracking or recording the payment. Clear? Any questions so far on this payment process? Before we actually record the payment transaction, you must have at least basic understanding, basic awareness on these points, so that it's easy for you to understand how we are making the payment, to make sure you get the point conceptually. Any questions you can ask now on this?
Sir, the wire transfer is under which category?
Bank transfer only.
Okay. So other than these, there is no category, right?
No, that is part of your bank transfer only. Your ACH payment, wire transfer, your NEFT payment, RTGS payment, IMPS payment, all are part of your bank transfer. Depending on the different countries, there will be different naming conventions for it. Slight changes in the payment, but these are bank transfer, bank to bank transfer payment.
Okay.
Okay, when we talk about this bank transfers, one more thing I want you to keep a note of it. There is something called bank to bank transfers. This is another payment. When you talk about bank to bank transfer payment, this is within company. Bank to bank transfer within company, which means, let's say in your company you may be holding three different bank accounts, correct? Every company will have more than one house bank. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Let's say you have three accounts. You have SBI account, you have HDFC account, you have Citibank, you have Axis Bank. Let's say you want to move your funds from SBI. Let's say you want to move 4,000 from SBI and you want to move it to Citibank. Possible or not? Can I do this in general?
Yes.
I want to move funds from one of my bank account to other bank account of mine only. In short, fund transfer within your bank accounts. For this, you have another functionality called bank to bank transfer. How you are going to perform bank to bank transfer. This also we have to test. This also you must know. This is another bank payment within your company, within your bank accounts. Clear? Any questions? No? Alright. Make sure you are practicing up to date from these topics. As I said, no exception for anybody to skip this point practicing. The previous topics, whether you practiced or not, is a different story. But from now onwards, I want everybody to practice at least 2 times. Whatever we are doing right now are very, very important from your interview point of view and from your project point of view. These are the things that you will be practically working when you are in a project. If the basics you have any confusions, you can attend the next batch. You can go through all the overview sessions. You can go through all the sessions from the beginning in the next batch. But from here onwards, I want you to focus more. Don't focus on the backlogs. If you have backlogs, just ignore the backlogs. Pay more attention, pay more focus on these areas. Clear? If you're focusing on the backlogs, we will end up staying at the backlog only. For backlogs, you can attend the next batch. You can continue from the beginning, from the basics once again. It will be revision for you. You don't have to again sit and practice again, once again. But these things is what you have to take very, very seriously. You have to be up to date. You have to make sure you will experiment different things on the system. You will practice different scenarios, and you are in a position to explain how you are doing the configuration, what is your requirement, what errors you are getting, how you are solving all these errors. Clear? All the small points that we are writing here, every point is important. These are all simple basic points, but all these simple basic points will play a very key role in understanding the subject, in understanding the concept. If we are skipping these small points, we will be able to do it in the system, but we will not be able to understand the logically. We will not be able to explain to the other person. Clear? All right, let me stop this recording.